Before we begin today's episode, we'd like to extend our gratitude to our sponsors at Avid for the incredible opportunity to raffle off a 1-year subscription to Media Composer as a thank you for watching. To enter, please visit postinblack.com/Avid and submit your information. The link will remain active for 1 week, and then the winner will be announced the next day via email and in an IG post on our social media. Thanks so much and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Post in Black, where we celebrate Black excellence behind the lens. Today, we are thrilled to have a special episode. As you can tell, we're in 2 different locations, and we have with us editor and assistant editor Dave Kalema. How you doing today, Dave?
I'm good, David. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Oh, man, you know, they're in trouble. They got 2 Davids on the project.
Not only that, 2 Davids and 2 Davids from the DC area, if I understand correctly.
Come on. And it looks like we go to the same barber. What are they doing?
Hey.
We are gonna give them something special today. We're excited to have you. As always, we like to start our Post in Black with a very special icebreaker. We care to do that?
Let's do it, man. Let's go.
All right, for sure. So, you know, we are in the filmmaking business and the industry, and I want to say that you were an editor, but if you were making a film about yourself and it was a film about you and your family, what actors would you choose to play the roles of you and any of your significant others?
Man, you're gonna hit me with that question. I'm a little bit like stuck on who the answer would be. You know, I've been like listening to the Ryan Coogler, like Michael B. Jordan chats because Sinners is coming out. And I don't want to say Michael B. Jordan, but it's like that's the only thing top of mind right now. You know,
nah, we are in sync. On my way here, driving to the interview to come record with you today, I was listening to the rest of that on the Breakfast Club.
No, so come on, incredible chat.
Tapped in. It was amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we got to go with Michael B.
We'll start there.
Yeah. That's all right. Would you have Coogler directing, or who would direct it?
Man, we could put Gina Prince Bythewood as the director.
Ooh,
classic. Yeah.
Come on. I love that.
Like because she comes from the world of sports, UCLA track and field. I come from a background of sports. Every time I listen to her, I understand the way that she runs her sets and like staffs her team. She has a very collaborative and driven mindset for the marathon that is filmmaking. So I'd put her in the director chair.
Man. Nah, we starting off hot. I love that. Well, now tell the people a little bit about yourself. Obviously, you got an eye for the, you know, you talked about being from the DC area and loving sports and playing sports. Tell the people about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm a first generation Ugandan American. I grew up in the DC area, like I said. I come from a big family. The way I tell it is like I grew up between worlds. So growing up, we would spend every summer in Uganda. This was like non-negotiable. You know, my mom was one of 9, my dad one of 18. I got like 27, 28 first cousins, like on my mom's side alone. So, you know, my parents in immigrating here to the States, their whole thing was like, okay, we got to spend summers back with our family so we can be around the family, but the kids, they got to know the culture as well. So I think a lot of what it did for me growing up was it made me unafraid to be in different situations. Like in Uganda, I was the American cousin, you know, in school here in the States. Me and my brother, we like the only Black kids in private school. My parents, there's church, we did taekwondo, we did basketball, we did soccer. There's a lot of things that we were doing, you know, and then there's the Ugandan family potlucks, you know, with the community every weekend. So we were around a ton of people, like moving around. And so sports for me was like maybe the one common denominator where I didn't have to figure out like, how do I fit into this space?
Yeah.
And I could use my commitment and my emotions to just say for me the things that might have been hard. And sports took me all the way through college. And I would say for me, that's a lot of how I grew up, like big family, playing sports, moving around throughout the year. And, you know, I know we'll get into how exactly I got into film, but none of my childhood was necessarily creative. Like it wasn't necessarily that I could see a life in film or see a life in this industry. Those steps came a little bit later, but, you know, my life was pretty eclectic and diverse, moving around and never really being fearful to be in spaces where people didn't look like me because this was a revolving door of how I grew up.
Yeah, that's really powerful because that's obviously the industry that we work in right now. We do all work in a lot of spaces that typically don't look like us. Sometimes we might be the only one, and it's navigating the language, navigating the conversations, navigating speaking up for yourself, navigating all the things that you talked about. Sports help give you a foundation for. I know we're going to get into it, but you growing up in the DMV and now you're working in the film industry. What was it? Maybe that sparked, there's a long journey because you're not only an editor, an assistant editor, you're a filmmaker, a documentary filmmaker. So can you talk about the journey and maybe something in the childhood that kind of got you on the path to where you are now?
Yeah, well, when I look back now, I feel like the seeds were always there, but I couldn't
Yeah.
necessarily see them. Like, I'll give an analogy first, but if you've seen the Knives Out movies,
Mm-hmm.
by you realize you're watching this like murder mystery, right? And you
Yeah.
see like one lens and how they tell the story. Then sometime towards the end, they replay different scenes from what you've seen, and you realize you didn't have all the information, and you understand the story a little bit better. Like if I was
Yeah.
talking to you 10 years ago when I came out of school, I would have told you, okay, cool, I'm going to start my career in business. I'm going to be at the nexus of economic development and venture capital. That's what I did in emerging
Mm-hmm.
markets. And I knew that world, like going to Uganda every year. So I spent the first 4 years of my career, I would say straight and narrow, but kind of doing, I think, what my childhood had prepared me for.
Mm-hmm.
The way that film came about was I really was working in that industry to get a perspective on what it would mean to start a business. I started a sports media company like in my mid 20s. I left a
Mm-hmm.
good job and I was trying to tell stories about life after sports. Have you heard of the Players Tribune?
Yeah. Yeah. Of course. Yeah.
Yes. So for me, I graduated school and I was reading this Player Tribune article, and it kind of hit me like I just finished my college basketball career. I don't have sports in my life for the first time in, we're talking decades at that point. And I realized that I wanted to tell stories about what happens in that transition. So I was trying to make the Players Tribune for athletes that don't go pro. And that's what got me to New York. That's what got me to, emerging market venture capitalism. It was just about having exposure to other entrepreneurs starting something. So in my
Yeah.
mid 20s, I was just hustling, writing articles, getting on the phone with former athletes, asking them, hey, can you write a piece for me? I love that story. How'd you transition into this career? I wanted to make it easier to find, in the same way Posting Black makes it easier for folks like me to find stories about Black individuals in post-production. I wanted to make it easier for athletes to understand there's life beyond that.
Yeah.
And just being scrappy and trying not to lose out on stories. I was speaking to a VP of a sports media company and she said she couldn't write. And I just lied. I was like, all right, I'm starting a film division. We got a video department. I'll come shoot it. And she was like, okay, in that case, cool. Like pull up basically.
Yeah.
And I got off the phone and I was like, all right, let's go to Best Buy and buy a camera. So I literally just like bought like a $300 like Canon T6. I show up with that in my iPhone. I went to B&H the day before. I bought a lav mic, and it was the first time I was really dabbling in video. And it was so empowering. I think there's moments in your life where you feel like you can feel it in your system. You
Mm-hmm.
can feel it like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, I really like doing that. And so I did that probably a few more times, and I didn't know how to edit it. So she asked me, hey, when's the video coming out? And I didn't know how to edit. So I had to ask my friend who I went to school with, hey, can you teach me how to edit? And so that was the first time that I'd opened up, I'd opened up Premiere, I opened up an NLE, and I was rearranging clips. And the desire to tell these stories, without a background in media was the way I put one foot in front of the other. Right before the pandemic, I went down to Miami. I was so emboldened by picking up a camera that I was shooting Shane Battier. He played with LeBron and D-Wade for the
Mm-hmm.
Miami Heat. He won 2
Mm-hmm.
championships. I'd met him years ago, and I just was like, hey, I'll be in Miami. Can we shoot something? I wasn't going to be in Miami, but I just wanted to see if I could do it. And so my friend brought down the Sony cameras, the nice lighting that you and I both got in different places. And when we got back to New York and edited it, she had the sound design, After Effects, Photoshop, and it made me understand. I couldn't actually say it at that time. I think this is my whole life catching up to me. I couldn't say, oh, I wanted to be a filmmaker or I wanted to be an editor. It was almost like that was like stuck in my throat because I spent so much of my life learning how to fit into other spaces and
Mm-hmm.
walking the straight and narrow. But I knew the feeling like, oh, I can do this.
Yeah.
I can be good at this. And so the pandemic shut down a lot of what I was building with that company, but I was watching The Last Dance and it made sense to me in a way that it never would have before Miami. And that's what put me on the path to become a documentary filmmaker and an editor. I was watching that and I said I could do it. I didn't know how, didn't have any connections, didn't really know what the jobs in the industry were, but it was one foot in front of the other, starting this company, not knowing what I was doing, writing, leading to picking up a camera, leading to editing. And then in the pandemic, when I couldn't do anything, I understood the language of filmmaking in a way that I knew I wanted to master it if given the chance.
That's powerful. That's really a powerful story. You actually answered the question I was going to ask you, how you even got into post-production. But, you said something in there. You talked about how you remember going backwards. And I love this quote that always talks about life is lived forward, but remember backwards. You know what I mean? You don't usually realize until you get on the other side what some of those destinations, those pit stops, if you will, how important they were to the overall journey and success of where you are. So you were creative because you talked about, hey, can we film something? Shane Battier, I'm gonna be in Miami, and it's almost putting yourself out there, and then it's like you just get the answer. Now all you got to do is get to Miami, and you can set yourself up for success. I like that because in this field, in this industry, you do have to be proactive. You do have to be creative and innovative in a way, and that's something. And then also your filmmaking skills. You're collecting all the footage, which is what an editor does.
Right.
So that bug after you shot in Miami, you became the filmmaker, and that you get the pandemic kind of put you on that track. What was it about specifically post production or filmmaking in general that said, you know what, this is a journey I want to go on full time?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think it's important to say, like, if there's anything I leave you with on this conversation, I want you to know that, like, for me, because of the way I was raised, the family I grew up in, I didn't necessarily have an example of how to do this. Like, I have to shout you out because on one of the Post in Black episodes, you talked about, I forget which episode, but you talked about watching BET's Comic View, right?
Yeah.
And I think before you came out to LA, you were talking about, wanting to be an actor. And I used to sneak downstairs at night and watch BET's Comic View. I haven't heard of it like until you said it. I forget which episode. And so I used to like love comedians, just the stage presence, like what it meant to be a storyteller.
Right.
When I was in college, I used to go to like improv shows and I used to go to spoken word open mics. But at that point, I was too scared to do it. Like, I think I had been watching these things for my whole life, but the example of what it meant to actually endeavor to try, it just, I didn't see it. So for me, I internalized, okay, that's certain people got the gift, but I don't have the gift. And I think what I'm trying to say is that for me, I think there's something in me that's like, all right, I don't need a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow to start. Like, let me just get myself in the room and I'll figure out. Let me just get myself to Miami and I'll figure it out. Let me just start this company. I don't have experience, but I can tell these stories. I'll figure it out. And so the way post-production came about, because there's many disciplines in film, like you're talking about, if I talked to you 5 years ago when I'm watching The Last Dance, I might have told you, okay, I want to be in film, but I don't know the difference between an assistant editor or an archival producer or, any of these roles that you might find behind the lens. I had started one-man banding. I was wearing all these hats. For me, it was bringing 2 cameras, my audio equipment, but I also had to edit these videos. So I started to understand from beginning to end what it took to put something together and put it out. But there were a few years, I think, after this conflict, after I watched The Last Dance, it was really like, do I want to keep building this company or do I want the craft? I started to want the craft. I started to want the journey of becoming like very skilled at something, to like become a storyteller. I'm a storyteller first. And so I was doing a lot of things. I was freelancing. I was doing events. I was shooting them myself, editing myself. I would sign up for these like production company lists where they need people to do, they would shoot like live audience members, think like Wendy Williams or something like that. And you would they'll call you to sit in the audience. You sit in the audience, you'd have a call time, but you would see the first AD call out to people and say, hey, you in the back, we need you to smile more when you clap. And you don't have a role, but you see what a production looks like. What happened for me is I went to Doc NYC in 2022. And that's when I met Eric Johnson, who we both know, my mentor, who helps produce this podcast. And at that point, I was just kid in the candy store. It was the first time I got to be around filmmakers who had their films like on a big screen. For weeks, I was just showing up early, watching as many films as I can. And they have these industry pro sessions. So every day they might have it's editing day or cinematography day or directing day or, raising funds as an independent filmmaker. So I would go to every one of them. And I just happened to be in line with Eric. Like before every session, we just started chatting. And then Eric, who's the senior vice president of sound at Trailblazer Studios, at the end of the week, he was leading a discussion about sound. There was a film, Hazing, that he had worked on out of Trailblazer Studios that went to PBS. And after that time, I understood that if I want to endeavor to like master this craft, I needed to pick one of these disciplines. Like I knew that I didn't actually want to wear every hat. I could if I wanted to, but when I'm watching something, I might love the sound or love the cinematography, but I can see good editing, and that seems achievable to me. Even if I can't do it tomorrow or a month from now, it always felt achievable to me in a way that the other disciplines felt like I could just be a fan or be appreciative of it. So the last couple of years was really a question of like, if I had to make money tomorrow off of one of these disciplines, what would it be? But it goes back to the way I felt after I edited the Shane video. That feeling to me is like still, I feel like if there's any reason that I played sports in my life, it's to know that feeling, like to know the feeling of like being able to see like the path or the vision in front of you that might take years, but that feeling for me has always been due north. It's always been the feeling that's guided me. So me and Eric got on a call maybe a year ago, and I was telling him where I was at. I had a film that I sent him, a short film that I'm working on, and I asked him for feedback, but I said, hey, I actually think I want to be an editor. Like if it comes to having to like master your craft over years, that path is the one that I'm willing to sit in, to learn from the best, to try and edit at a high level. And we talked about assistant editing. He told me about the Handy Foundation. I know you've had Ricardo on the podcast before.
Yeah.
So last year I was in the Handy Foundation training, learning Avid, learning assistant editor workflows while applying for industry standard, which we'll get to. But last year was, I think, the time where I took all my experience, all this ambition, and let me get myself in the room and started to narrow it and say, which of these disciplines do I want to take the chance to really learn, like the front and back of my hand? Like one thing that I'm a big fan of, and I'll shout out Charles Little, who you've had on the podcast as well. I'm really a fan of when I hear people talk and they can really talk to something like the front and back of their hand. They can talk to the history of it. They can talk to like the nuances of a craft. And so I listened to your conversation with Charles Little. Then I started like deep YouTube rabbit hole about like Charles Little's career. And there's this video of him, I think it's an Avid promotion, and he's talking about when he's in flow, he can edit without looking at the keyboard. You know, he can, it's like, I don't know if he used these words, but I understood what he was saying. Like, it's like playing piano. You know, he can move clips around. He can, you know, match frame, find bin. He can, you know, slice all these things. And it's like, if you've ever watched a jazz musician in flow, close their eyes and you see the band around them, understand, okay, he's in a moment. Like, let him have this moment.
I'm sitting over here and I'm inspired because you're a powerful brother. I don't know if you know that, but it's just the way you talk, the passion behind your words, what you're saying, the message, and then the details, the intention behind the research, the defining it. You know, one of the questions I had on the cue card was to ask you how Post and Black has been impactful for you, but you just talked about researching previous guests, listening to what they say, then diving in a little bit further. It's like me watching a TV show. I can't watch something now without looking up IMDb and then going to IMDb Pro and then seeing who their manager is or who their agent is, and then what show are they on or what's upcoming, what's pending, what's filmed. So it's just the deep dive into the history and to what we want to do because we're really passionate about it and love it. Eric is amazing. He's been such a huge part of our growth here at Post and Black, and just love everything about what he's doing. You talked about, you know, meeting him, but then industry standard where you work now. Can you talk about industry standard? Because we have some guests we're going to bring in a second, but talk about what you do with them and how you even got set up with industry standard, what that is.
Yeah. So right now I'm in my first gig in the industry as an assistant editor, and Industry Standard is a company that has a program. It's called the Residency by Industry Standard. And it's a 9-month post-production residency to help emerging and diverse talent like myself work at professional studios where they get to work on premium documentaries and features that will be on streamers. And so what this experience has allowed me to do is to take a lot of the, number one, to take my background as a Ugandan American who's navigated multiple spaces in different worlds, who took a risk to try and carve out a life as a storyteller in this industry, who wore a lot of hats, had a lot of ambition, put himself in situations where he was forced to learn. The Industry Standard gave me a 9-month residency and job where I could finally take those skills and those workflows that I was learning and do it on a project that would be seen at a big scale. And so what the residency does is it places five different individuals at different studios and cohorts. I myself am at Library Films. Library Films is a small production studio that definitely punches above their weight. They make premium documentaries for every streamer that they work with, but they've done, you know, Tiger King for Netflix. They've done Emmy-winning 100 Foot Wave for HBO. They just did the Mr. McMahon series for Netflix. Senior, which is about Robert Downey Jr. and his father, that documentary, the Richard Branson documentary. They do a lot of documentaries at a premium scale, and they work with every streamer in the business. And so for me, I'm an assistant editor at Library Films, and I was placed there by Industry Standard, who helped me get my foot in the door. So I know we'll bring in Jen and Bedonna and talk about, their intentions for this program, but the idea of it is to build sustainable careers for individuals like myself at this level of filmmaking.
So we're excited to have with us on Post and Black two heavyweights in there, right? And I could introduce you all as well, but I'll start with Jennifer. Would you mind telling us all about yourself and what it is you do with Industry Standard?
I've spent the greater part of my career in post-production. I used to run a fairly large post-production studio that had a relationship with Netflix. And Bedonna and I are old colleagues and collaborators on a variety of different things. And together, we saw the opportunity to create a program that could really support the talent that is trying to break into the industry in the post-production field. We recognize that there is a lot of support around the above the line positions, writer, director, on-screen talent, but very little support for below the line. And because we had such a long history and background in post-production, we recognize that those careers they have longevity beyond production. And there's a really healthy living to be made in your career in post.
My name's Bedonna Smith, and as Jen said, Jen has expertise throughout her career in post-production, and I, as a producer, by the time I got to post-production, was always mystified and amazed by the talented people who were bringing the work to completion. And I would look at an assistant editor and an editor and their relationship and not understand the first thing about how they were making the magic on the keys as swiftly as they do. And I know that to have a fulsome understanding of post-production requires expertise and detail and curiosity. And as Jen said, we could both see that these careers are durable, bountiful, super creative, and allow the professionals in post to interact with top caliber creatives throughout the filmmaking stream, and how important those relationships are. So that was, where this shared passion to start something, and matched with the support from Netflix and the other studios, really just sang for us. So Jen and I have been fortunate to combine our interests and our passions to bring Industry Standard to life.
What was it about Dave's application process that stood out among everyone else? Because I know that you receive a lot of people that want to be part of Industry Standard. What was it about that, Jennifer?
Well, Dave's application was probably one of the first applications that I reviewed personally. We had 400 applications, and Dave's was definitely one of the first 10, I'd say, that I reviewed. And I remember saying to Bedonna, you have to look at this guy's application. You have to look at this guy's application, because it was so strong. You could tell he was driven. You could tell he was super creative. But most importantly, he was able to use the application as a storytelling tool, which is rare. And when you look at, 400 applications, these are the things that help you navigate how to advance people further into the interview process. And you could tell that Dave took what was being asked of him and told a story and told his story. And what that did was it made us connect with him. And that's what this industry is about. It's about connections and eliciting that emotional response in filmmaking. And I know that that's what Dave ultimately wants to achieve, but for us, he's already done it.
Can you talk about what the application process looks like for those that know? Because, And then I want to ask Dave, just to put that out there, but then I'm gonna ask Dave, what was it about your application? What did you put into like passion, or what would you recommend to others when applying?
This residency cycle is the second cycle that we conducted after having done our pilot cycle in 2023. And we have had positive feedback about our application itself. There are the central components of an application are a letter of intent, your resume, and letters of recommendation from a couple of people who know you well. And included in our questions are is one about your inspiration. Whether it's a piece of art, a piece of media, a book, a poem, something, a piece of wisdom someone shared with you, some of your most inspirational pieces, and those components. We invite the applicant to share with us, and it creates a folder. And we have a cohort of industry peers that are comprised of experts from all walks. So producers, writers, directors, editors, human resource folks who individually, each application is reviewed by two separate individuals and then scored on a rubric. And some people are ready for the workplace and they're not right for the residency. Some people are too early and too green. We're looking for a sweet spot of skilled professionals who are ready to be dropped into these high intensity environments that our host studios represent. So once an application comes in, drops into this review process, is scored, the top ranking then proceed to an interview stage. And there are a few rounds of interviews that gets narrowed to a pool of finalists. And those finalists are interviewed also by our colleagues at the host studios. So in this cycle, we went from 400, as we mentioned, down to a small pool that netted these 5 individuals. And I'll just share that in each of our 2 cycles, Jennifer and I and all of our colleagues at Netflix and the studios have met 10 of the most wonderful people. We've been very blessed in that we've met 10 of the most wonderful collaborators that we know we will be in relationship with and in support of for the rest of ours and their careers.
For me, my basically what I told myself was like, tell a story that only I can tell. I was looking at 30, trying to get into the industry, no film school. There wasn't a film underneath my belt that you could look up and see my name in the credits somewhere. I've been editing these digital shorts. I've been freelancing, doing events. I could edit, but for me, I knew that if you needed somebody to tell a story based on work they'd done in the industry, I wasn't your person. And that wasn't the story that I wasn't. And I didn't want to try to tell that story. I'm a Ugandan American. I've traveled the world through my family, through the early part of my career. And what I tried to do was speak to my influences, my storytelling inspirations, and use that as a way to let Jen and Bedonna know what I was aiming for, and that I wasn't afraid to do the work, even starting in my early 30s. It's a part of the application that, like Bedonna talked about, gives you the opportunity to talk about a creative influence. And I shared 3. One was Haruki Murakami. He's a novelist, a Japanese novelist who his work is great, but I found his book while I was trying to get into the industry. And I learned that in his 30s, he sold his jazz club to write, to take a shot at writing. He didn't have a background in the medium either. But I use that to say, one, I understand that you can carve a life out in a craft if you're willing to do the work. You can start at any age. I want that for me was kind of like the number one point I was trying to prove to them. The other is Get Out, which is my favorite film, which to me is the pinnacle of storytelling, because a lot of what it does is it invites the audience to be a participant in the storytelling. What Jordan Peele does is he doesn't give you all the information. So you're constantly engaged in a way where you're like, something seems off and I don't know what it is, but you're guessing the whole time. And I think great storytelling allows audiences to participate in the film, because an editor has to be at master at timing and knowing what to give you when. And I wanted to use that to tell them that I'm out here to master this craft. I'm a storyteller first. And when it comes to editing, I understand the power that editing has in keeping audiences engaged. And a book of mine that I read, a book that I read recently was called Origin of Inspiration. It's from a Ghanaian painter. And he talks about, like, you can't have vision without technique. Like, there's no vision without the skill to do it. And for me, what I was telling them was, like, in many ways, that's the job of an assistant editor and an editor, right? Like, your job is to translate a director and a producer's vision into something digestible for audiences, into something digestible for the people around you. But even an editor whose job is just to be creative, they need workflows, organization, they need technique. They need all of the things taken care of so an editor can allow that vision to take shape over the matter of months or years or however long. So for me, as somebody who came from a non-traditional background, I was giving them a chance to understand these are the things in the world that touch my heart. These are the things in the world that inspire me, that even in my early 30s, I'm unafraid to dream and I'm unafraid to do the work if I have to start from zero. So for anybody who's thinking about the application, I would say own your story, number one. I would say tell the story that only you can tell. And as you live in the world, like, pay attention to what inspires you, because that's also a window into how other people can understand not only where you're at in life, but where you want to go. Because I think at the end of the day, like, taking it back to the podcast, like Stephanie Philo, like, she's from Sierra Leone, like, she danced for the Denver Broncos, and she's a filmmaker. And all of those things inform how you show up in the room. All of those things inform how people relate to you. So own your story.
Have some of the fellows landed that have come through the program, if you will?
There's one actually that's a colleague of Dave's now at Library Films. So it's a really unique opportunity for the two of them to work alongside each other. I think it's given Dave an extra layer of support while he's been in the program. There's another person from the editorial track who has freelanced at a few different studios in New York. One of the residents from the first cycle who was in the sound track, she actually, after she had completed the residency, she was actually nominated for an Emmy for her work that she did while in the residency, which is also a really unique position to be in. And then another one was in the production track, and he's also he continues to work with the same team that he was positioned with as well in LA, amongst other freelance opportunities. But yeah, he continues to work with them.
I just want to say thank you to Jennifer. Thank you, Bedonna. Thank you, Dave, for just your time, your just creativity. The work that you're doing is impactful. It's been an amazing honor to have all of you on the show. And then my last thing I'm going to ask each of you to do is just share where people can stay connected with you, Industry Standard, as well, for moving forward and paying attention to what's going on. I'll start with Jennifer.
If you visit the website industrystandard.work, there's a newsletter you can sign up for there, and you can get in touch in a variety of different ways. But that's probably the best way to get in touch with us, and also follow us on our socials, LinkedIn and Instagram.
And I would just add something that Dave brought up, which is we have a sharp and keen eye for people with the entrepreneurial spirit, because every artist, every professional in post is truly shaping their own business as they work. And we all know it's very much a freelance marketplace. So those who approach their work without entrepreneurial spirit, we know that they can build the tools to support themselves. So I just wanted to shout that out. And as well, thank you to Eric Johnson, who saw when we first announced and got in touch with us and was diligent about making sure that we made a connection and established a friendship. And every person we've met who knows Eric, including Dave and people Eric just meets, he is a true anchor of support for everyone in his community. And it has really touched us. So we're so grateful to be in friendship with Post in Black and with all of you. And thank you. Yeah, and we just encourage everyone to get in touch and build relationship. There are other initiatives additional to the experience residencies that Jen and I are working to build. So yeah, thank you for the opportunity to chat with y'all today.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for the opportunity to chat. In terms of following me, I'm online. I tend to be focused on the craft, but Dave Kalema on Instagram. Find me on LinkedIn as well. I have a website. There's a mini reel. My bio is there. But yeah, Dave Kalema, typically on Instagram. I'm on Facebook too. But yeah.
We'll stay connected with Industry Standard and continue to share all the work that you're doing too. And I just want to echo what you said about Eric Johnson. Like Eric and I connected on LinkedIn years ago, and since we have met, we have just seen a growth in terms of knowledge of what we've learned, in terms of relationships, and just a grounding. Because his presence is very calming and very relaxed, but he's always forward thinking. So I'm very thankful for his expertise and having that as a mentor as well. So we just want to thank for that, and then thank you to Avid, our supporting sponsor, for helping us out with this episode. We are giving and releasing 1 year Avid Media Composer license for every episode this season. Thank you to Avid, and thank you to our title sponsor, Dolby, for supporting us. Without you, this work would not be able to be done. So until next time, please stay tuned, subscribe, like, share this episode with everyone you know, and we'll see you next time on Post and Flag.